There comes a moment in the life of an empath when something shifts so profoundly that the world as they knew it begins to crumble, not in a destructive way, but in the way a cocoon must break for the butterfly to emerge. You've carried other people's emotions like they were your own. You've absorbed their pain, their anger, their unspoken grief. You've been the lighthouse in everyone else's storm, while your own light flickered in silence. And then one day, without warning, you wake up, not gently, not peacefully, but with a clarity so sharp it almost cuts through the fabric of who you thought you were. Carl Jung called this the process of individuation, the journey toward becoming your true self, separate from the collective identities you've worn to please, to protect, to survive. But for the empath, this awakening is particularly dangerous, not because it harms you, but because it threatens every relationship, every dynamic, every unspoken contract you've ever signed with your silence. When an empath wakes up, they begin to see the invisible threads that have bound them to other people's needs, and for the first time they consider cutting them, not out of cruelty but out of survival. You've spent years, maybe decades, believing that your sensitivity was a gift meant to be given away freely. You felt everything so deeply that you assumed it was your responsibility to heal, to fix, to hold space for everyone who couldn't hold it for themselves. But somewhere along the way, you forgot that feeling deeply also means you need deep rest, deep nourishment, deep reciprocity. You gave from an empty well, and when there was nothing left, you dug deeper, until your body said no, until your mind grew foggy, until your heart, that beautiful, overstretched heart, began to close just to survive. The awakening isn't a single moment. It's a series of small deaths. The death of the version of you who said yes when you meant no. The death of the identity built around being needed. The death of the belief that your worth is measured by how much you can endure. And with each death comes a grief so profound that it feels like you're losing yourself. But Jung would tell you that you're not losing yourself. You're losing the masks you wore to belong to a world that never truly saw you. This stage is dangerous because you start to see clearly. You see who only loved you for what you could provide. You see the relationships held together by your constant giving. You see how your empathy was mistaken for weakness, your silence for agreement, your exhaustion for peace. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The question then becomes, what do you do with this knowledge? Do you return to the sleep, to the comfort of the familiar prison? Or do you step into the unknown, into the version of yourself that refuses to shrink anymore? What was the moment you realized you couldn't keep living the way you were living? Was there a specific breaking point, or did it creep up on you slowly, like a whisper you could no longer ignore? Jung spoke often of the shadow, that part of ourselves we hide because we're afraid of what it might reveal. For most people, the shadow contains rage, selfishness, cruelty. But for the empath, the shadow holds something even more terrifying: the capacity to say no, the ability to choose yourself, the audacity to believe that your needs matter as much as everyone else's. You've been taught, either explicitly or implicitly, that to be good is to be selfless, that to be loving is to be available, that to be spiritual is to transcend your own human needs. And so you buried the parts of you that wanted boundaries, that craved solitude, that dreamed of a life where you weren't always the one holding everything together. When you begin to wake up, your shadow doesn't emerge quietly. It roars. It demands to be seen after years of being locked away. And this roar is what makes this stage so dangerous, not just for you, but for everyone around you. Because the people who benefited from your endless giving will not celebrate your awakening. They will call you selfish. They will say you've changed. They will mourn the version of you that never asked for anything in return. And in some way they're right. You have changed. You've stopped betraying yourself to keep the peace. Jung believed that integrating the shadow was essential to becoming whole. But integration doesn't mean unleashing your rage on everyone who ever took advantage of your kindness. It means acknowledging that your anger is valid, that your exhaustion is real, that your need for boundaries isn't a moral failing. It means sitting with the discomfort of knowing that being kind to yourself might mean disappointing others. And for the empath, this is the hardest lesson of all. You've spent so long feeling other people's feelings that you've become disconnected from your own. When someone is upset with you, you feel their disappointment as if it were a physical weight on your chest. When someone withdraws their approval, you feel the absence like a wound. This is why setting boundaries feels like an act of violence for the empath. Because you don't just set the boundary, you feel the other person's reaction to it, and that feeling is almost unbearable. So you've learned to avoid it by never setting boundaries at all. But your shadow knows something your conscious mind has tried to deny, that you cannot heal anyone by continuing to wound yourself. That true compassion includes yourself. That the most loving thing you can do is to stop pretending you don't have limits. Your shadow isn't asking you to become cold or unfeeling. It's asking you to become honest, to stop performing empathy and start living authentically. And that authenticity will cost you. It will cost you relationships that were only held together by your silence. It will cost you the identity of being the person everyone can count on. But what you gain is infinitely more valuable. You gain yourself back. Jung wrote that the persona is the mask we wear to navigate society, the version of ourselves we present to be accepted, to be safe, to belong. But for the empath, the persona becomes more than a mask. It becomes a prison. You've crafted an identity around being understanding, patient, endlessly forgiving. You've become the person people come to when they need to unload their burdens. And somewhere in the process of becoming everyone's safe harbor, you stopped being a person with your own needs, your own storms, your own right to be held. The awakening forces you to confront a painful truth. The person you've been is not who you are. It's who you had to become to survive in relationships and environments that couldn't handle your full humanity. You learned early, perhaps in childhood, that your sensitivity was either a gift to be used or a weakness to be hidden. So you used it. You became the mediator, the healer, the one who could sense what others needed before they even asked. And in doing so, you abandoned yourself. This death of the false self is perhaps the most disorienting part of the awakening. Because if you're not the person who fixes everything, who are you? If you're not constantly available, what is your value? If you start saying no, will anyone stay? These questions haunt you as you begin to dismantle the identity you've built. And there are days when the fear becomes so overwhelming that you almost retreat back into the familiar role. Because at least in that role, you knew who you were. At least there, you were needed. But Jung would remind you that true individuation requires the death of these false identities. That you cannot become who you're meant to be while clinging to who you've pretended to be. The false self must die so the true self can emerge. And this death is not a one-time event. It's a process of continual letting go of the need to be liked, letting go of the belief that your sensitivity is only valuable when it serves others, letting go of the fear that if you stop giving, you'll be abandoned. What emerges in the space left by the false self is something raw and real. It's a version of you that feels both foreign and familiar. It's the child you were before the world taught you that your empathy was a commodity. It's the adult you're becoming, who knows that true strength isn't measured by how much you can endure, but by how willing you are to honor your own truth. This version of you is dangerous because it refuses to participate in dynamics that require your diminishment. It insists on reciprocity. It demands to be met with the same depth of care it offers, and this insistence will change everything. There's a profound loneliness that comes with waking up, because once you see clearly, you begin to notice how many of your relationships were built on an unequal exchange, how many people only called when they needed something, how many connections were maintained by your constant effort, your constant bending, your constant making yourself smaller so others could feel bigger. And when you stop bending, when you stop shrinking, many of those relationships simply fade away. Not with dramatic endings or angry confrontations, but with a quiet, aching distance that confirms what you feared all along. They never loved all of you. They loved what you could do for them. Jung spoke of individuation as a lonely path, and for the empath, this loneliness is particularly acute because you've spent your life surrounded by people, needed by people, consumed by people. Your calendar was full, your phone was always ringing, but in your awakening you realized that you were alone even then. Alone with your own feelings, alone with your own exhaustion, alone in relationships where your depth was never truly met. The loneliness of the awakening is simply the acknowledgement of a solitude that was always there, hidden beneath the noise of everyone else's needs. This is the dangerous part that no one tells you about, that choosing yourself will sometimes mean choosing to be alone, that setting boundaries will sometimes mean standing in empty rooms, that honoring your truth will sometimes mean sitting in silence while others walk away. And for the empath who has built their entire identity around connection, This loneliness can feel unbearable. It can make you question whether the awakening was worth it, whether you should have just stayed asleep, stayed small, stayed safe in the familiar suffering. But here's what Jung understood. What becomes clearer as you move through this stage? The loneliness of liberation is different from the loneliness of abandoning yourself. The loneliness you feel now is clean. It's honest. It's the solitude required to finally hear your own voice after years of drowning it out with everyone else's. This loneliness is not a punishment. It's a sacred pause. It's the space between who you were and who you're becoming. And in this space, something miraculous happens. You begin to meet yourself, not the self that was shaped by others' expectations, but the self that has always been there, waiting patiently beneath all the noise. You start to discover what you actually enjoy, not what you've pretended to enjoy to make others comfortable. You begin to feel your own feelings, not just everyone else's. You start to hear the whispers of your own desires, your own dreams, your own boundaries. And slowly the loneliness transforms into solitude. And solitude, when chosen consciously, becomes the foundation of genuine connection. Have you felt this loneliness? Are you in it right now, wondering if anyone will meet you at the depth you're finally willing to show? And what have you discovered about yourself in the silence? One of the most unexpected parts of the empath's awakening is the guilt. You'd think that choosing yourself after years of self-abandonment would feel liberating, empowering, like finally coming home. And sometimes it does. But more often, especially in the beginning, it feels like betrayal. You feel guilty for disappointing people who were used to your endless availability. You feel guilty for setting boundaries with those who never respected your limits. You feel guilty for finally acknowledging that you're tired, that you're hurt, that you've been running on empty for far too long. This guilt is insidious because it's been wired into you, likely since childhood. You learned that your value was tied to your usefulness, that love was something you earned through sacrifice, that being a good person meant putting everyone else first. And now, as you begin to prioritize your own well-being, that old programming kicks in with a vengeance. It tells you you're selfish. It tells you you're abandoning people who need you. It tells you that the moment you stop giving, you'll prove that you're not as good as you've always tried to be. Jung would recognize this guilt as the voice of the collective unconscious, the internalized voices of every person and system that benefited from your self-sacrifice. It's not your true voice. It's the echo of a world that taught you that your needs don't matter as much as everyone else's. And part of your awakening is learning to distinguish between genuine moral guidance and the false guilt that keeps you trapped in old patterns. Here's the truth that takes time to fully embody. You are not responsible for other people's reactions to your growth. You are not responsible for managing other people's disappointment when you can no longer be who they needed you to be. You are not responsible for staying small so others can remain comfortable. Your responsibility is to your own integrity, your own health, your own soul. And when you finally accept this, the guilt begins to transform into something else. Not pride necessarily, but a quiet, steady knowing that you're finally on the right path. There will be people who make you feel guilty for changing, who remind you of all the times you were there for them, implying that you owe them your continued self-sacrifice, who weaponize your empathy against you, knowing that your sensitivity makes you vulnerable to their pain. But your awakening has given you a new ability, the capacity to feel someone's pain without taking responsibility for fixing it, to have compassion without compliance, to love someone without losing yourself in the process. The guilt will fade as you build evidence that choosing yourself doesn't make you a bad person, that setting boundaries doesn't mean you don't care, that prioritizing your well-being actually makes you more capable of genuine connection, because you're no longer connecting from depletion, from obligation, from fear of abandonment. You're connecting from wholeness, from choice, from authentic care, and that changes everything. This is where the awakening becomes truly dangerous, but not in the way you might think. It's dangerous because an empath who has integrated their shadow, who has mourned the false self, who has moved through the loneliness and guilt, becomes someone who cannot be manipulated.
Cannot be guilted into self-abandonment, cannot be convinced that their needs are less important than everyone else's. An empowered empath is dangerous to every system, relationship, and dynamic that relied on their silence. Jung believed that true individuation creates a kind of spiritual authority, not over others but over your own life. And for the empath, this authority is revolutionary.
Because you've spent so long deferring to other people's feelings, other people's needs, other people's versions of reality. You've doubted your own perceptions because you were told you were too sensitive, too emotional, too much. But in your awakening, you begin to trust yourself again. You trust that what you feel is real. You trust that your boundaries are valid. You trust that your needs matter. This trust is what makes you powerful. Because when you trust yourself, you stop seeking external validation. You stop contorting yourself to fit other people's expectations. You stop abandoning your truth to keep the peace. And this refusal to participate in your own diminishment changes the dynamics of every relationship you're in. Some relationships will deepen because they finally have space for your full humanity. Others will end because they were only held together by your willingness to disappear. The empowered empath learns to alchemize their sensitivity from a wound into a gift, but not the kind of gift that's given away freely to anyone who asks. It becomes a gift you offer consciously to those who have earned your trust, who reciprocate your care, who see you as a full human being rather than a resource to be used. You learn that your empathy is precious, that your emotional energy is finite, that your presence is valuable. And you begin to guard these things the way you would guard anything sacred. This doesn't mean you become cold or closed off. It means you become discerning. You develop what Jung called conscious discrimination, the ability to sense who is safe, who is genuine, who is capable of meeting you with the same depth you offer. You stop over-functioning in relationships. You stop explaining yourself to people who have no intention of understanding you. You stop trying to earn love from those who have already shown you they're not capable of giving it. And here's what's beautiful about this stage. You discover that real love, genuine connection, authentic relationship has been waiting for you all along. Not the kind that demands your constant sacrifice, but the kind that celebrates your wholeness. Not the kind that needs you to be less so they can be more, but the kind that wants you to be fully, unapologetically yourself. When did you first realize that your empathy could be a strength, rather than something to be used? And who in your life has shown you that real love doesn't require you to disappear? Jung's concept of individuation isn't about becoming perfect, it's about becoming whole. And wholeness includes all the parts of you that you've tried to hide, deny, or transcend. For the empath, integration means bringing together the part of you that feels deeply with the part that needs boundaries. The part that wants to help with the part that needs rest. The part that loves connection with the part that craves solitude. You're not trying to stop being an empath. You're learning to be an empath who also knows how to protect their own energy. This integration is a delicate dance, because you're not swinging from one extreme to another, from complete self-abandonment to complete isolation. You're finding the middle path, the place where you can remain open-hearted without being porous, where you can offer compassion without taking on other people's pain as your own. You're learning that you can feel someone's suffering without making it your responsibility to fix, that you can love someone without losing yourself in them, that you can be sensitive without being fragile. Part of this integration involves reclaiming the parts of yourself you've neglected. Maybe it's your creativity, which you abandoned because you were too busy taking care of everyone else. Maybe it's your voice, which you silenced because you were afraid of conflict. Maybe it's your dreams, which you postponed because other people's needs always seemed more urgent. As you integrate, you make space for these neglected parts. You give them time, attention, nourishment. You begin to build a life that's actually yours, not just a life in service of everyone else. You also learn to integrate your empathy with wisdom, because empathy without wisdom leads to burnout, to codependency, to the kind of helping that actually enables dysfunction. Wisdom teaches you that sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is let someone face the consequences of their choices, that sometimes people need to sit with their discomfort to grow, that your constant rescuing might actually be preventing their evolution. This is a hard lesson for the empath, who has been conditioned to believe that love means always being available, always offering help. But true love sometimes means stepping back, allowing space, trusting that others are capable of their own growth. Integration also means accepting that you'll never go back to who you were before the awakening. That innocence is gone. That naivete has been replaced with clarity. And while there may be moments when you long for the simplicity of not seeing, of not knowing, you understand that consciousness, once gained, cannot be ungained. You've eaten the fruit from the tree of knowledge, and there's no returning to the garden of unconscious giving. All you can do is move forward, bringing your new awareness into every relationship, every choice, every moment. The integrated empath is someone who has learned to hold paradox, to be both soft and strong, both open and boundaried, both feeling and discerning. This is the wholeness Jung spoke of, and it's worth every difficult step of the journey. And so you arrive here, at the end of the awakening and the beginning of a new way of being. You're not the same person who started this journey. You've shed layers of false identity, released relationships that required your diminishment, faced the shadow parts of yourself you've always feared. You've walked through the loneliness, sat with the guilt, and emerged on the other side with a clarity that feels both terrifying and liberating. You're awake now, and there's no going back to sleep. This is the dangerous stage Jung spoke of in a different way. It's dangerous because you're no longer willing to participate in your own suffering. You're no longer available for dynamics that require you to be less. You're no longer interested in relationships that only go one way. And this unwillingness makes you a disruptor, not aggressively, not violently, but simply by existing in your truth. Your presence alone challenges everyone around you to look at their own patterns, their own wounds, their own unwillingness to grow. But here's what you've learned through all of this. You don't need everyone to understand your journey. You don't need everyone to celebrate your growth. You don't need external validation for the internal shifts you've made. You found something more valuable than approval. You found yourself. And once you've found yourself, once you've come home to your own soul, nothing else can compare. The new beginning is not about becoming someone different. It's about becoming more fully who you've always been beneath all the conditioning, all the people-pleasing, all the self-abandonment. It's about living from the inside out rather than the outside in. It's about making choices based on your own inner knowing rather than other people's expectations. It's about building a life that honors your sensitivity while also protecting it. You'll still feel deeply. You'll still care about others. You'll still want to help, to heal, to hold space. But now you do it from choice rather than compulsion, from fullness rather than depletion, from love rather than fear. And the people who are meant to be in your life will meet you there, in that space of authentic connection. They'll see you, all of you, and they won't ask you to be anything other than what you are. This is what Jung meant by individuation, not isolation, but authentic individuality within genuine relationship, not becoming invulnerable, but becoming whole, not losing your empathy, but learning to direct it wisely, including toward yourself. You've reached the dangerous stage, the stage where you refuse to betray yourself anymore, and in that refusal, you've found your freedom. If this journey resonates with you, if you see yourself in any part of this awakening, I want you to know that you're not alone. Share your experience in the comments below. What part of this awakening are you in right now? What's the hardest lesson you've had to learn? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to keep going. And if this video served you, if it helped you feel seen and understood, consider subscribing so we can continue walking this path together. Share it with another empath who might need these words today. Thank you for being here. Thank you for having the courage to wake up, to grow, to become who you truly are. Thank you for trusting me with your time and your attention. The world needs empaths who are awake, who are whole, who refuse to shrink anymore. And you're becoming one of them. That's the most dangerous and beautiful thing of all.